And today we're speaking with Edmund Monk, who is the CEO and co-founder of LPI, a global body for workplace learning. Um, Welcome, Ed. And I want to start our interview by asking you, is training really the solution for all organizational problems?
That's a big question. It's not the only solution. I think more than ever, we can see that lifelong learning is classed as an economic imperative. So if we don't invest in our own development and if organizations don't invest in their people's development, then there will be a situation that is terminal. So we do need to keep investing in learning. What I would say that is particularly interesting is that there are so many moves with generative AI now towards performance support that what learning is and what training is now completely different to maybe even just a year ago, 2 years ago.
How different it is, because I'm doing a master's degree, and I remember when I was doing my first master's degree, it was so, you had to go to the library, you had to like just open things, and search. I still do that because I love doing it. But also there is this option of just, using ChatGPT and say, hey, could you pull out this paper for me? I would like to read it. Or what would you recommend in terms of that? Is that how it is across the board? Or I'm using a live example, but what about everything else? Is that how it is across the board?
Um, the opportunities that we now have with generative AI tools are unprecedented.
Right.
With that comes a great deal of responsibility as well.
Yeah.
So, yes, you and I can get an answer to something within a few seconds. The context of that answer and how it would resonate within a particular community. So, if I took the answer to a question and then went into the company knowing that that was the right answer, it may not be for that organization. So, it's actually not always right. Basically, it is scraping the internet for answers. So, it'll give you the best answer. If you put into ChatGPT, certainly in its first iteration, I think it's still the case,
Mhm.
the image generator, can you send me an image of a FTSE 250 or Fortune 500 board meeting? It will show you 10 white middle-aged men in a boardroom. So, there are problems with that. That's not right. That shouldn't be what's happening. And yet the arguments would be, well, it's not great, but that probably is what a lot of those boardrooms look like. So there are societal issues, there's contextual issues, which I still think means that the value of a human being in these situations is extremely important. So
Right.
I talk a lot and support a lot of the largest technology companies in the world on this. And the best way I can describe it is it's like a convenience efficacy paradox. So everybody's driving towards convenience because it's so great to use this and get answers so quickly. It doesn't necessarily mean that it gives you the impact. And with
Right.
learning, it's even more pertinent, that statement.
But then let's talk a little bit about performance, because then how can we make sure people are performing, learning, doing there's a lot of things here, and it's just difficult for anyone to be performing while learning, while conducting their jobs. So what do you think? What do you have to say about this, actually?
I don't think it is difficult. I would say that's my, to be quite blunt, that maybe for the last 10 years, we've been talking about learning in the flow of work. Okay. So being able to access learning experiences quickly because I need an answer now. The internet,
Hmm.
amazing. I can get an answer to something. Pre that, it would take ages. I'm
Hmm.
of the generation that would go to the library and look at an encyclopedia when I was at school. Now it's incredible what you can get access to.
Right.
So it's more and more convenient. What we need to understand is what is learning and what is performance support. So it's not necessarily learning for you and I to be able to click on something and get an answer to something straight away. It's what do I do with that information? How do I
Right.
use that in a job or in a responsible situation? Two very different things.
And can learning actually impact the performance of the employee?
Without question.
I mean, it's a very broad question, because the simple answer would be yes, but
Mhm.
perhaps it isn't. Perhaps it's the opposite. Perhaps a person learning could actually make them not want to do their current job and just leave it and go somewhere else, or and so forth.
They would be going to do that anyway if they did that. It's just speeding up what they were already thinking of doing. So there's the classic statement from people who are purchasing training for their staff. But if
Mm.
I invest in them, they'll leave. Okay, but if you don't invest in them and they stay, they're not going to be great, are they? So it's just a cyclical thing. You have to keep investing in people. This generation coming through now is more in control of their own destiny and career than any I've ever known.
Right.
And they hold all the cards. I interview people to come and work at the OPI, global company, and they're 21 years old telling me that they'll give me 2 years and I should be grateful. It's, it's incredible.
You should.
Yeah, but
Two
I really
years is
admire
a
the
lot.
confidence. Yeah, I'm so lucky. Thank you. But you have to admire the confidence.
To be fair, I look at myself and as well, and I see the trajectory of things now in 2024 compared to when I started in 20. When did I start? 2008, 2007, and things are different even as someone who's in the workforce now. And how this brings me to my question is how can data-driven um, research help companies decide whether this is the right path to learning and development or not? Because, and I want to tie it back to my previous comment because
Mhm.
people could look at workforce within my age range and say, oh yeah, we know these people, they can just go on this, they can study it this way or do that. But the reality is different. We also have opinion and very strong ones. So how can companies use data-driven researchers or data-driven insights to actually influence themselves on whether they will go for this training or not? They will make this decision or not.
Yeah, data is the key to absolutely everything.
Yeah.
But what people misunderstand often when we talk about data is just a set of ones and zeros, basically.
Mhm.
That's not actually the value. What's the value is what you can do with that data to create information, what you do with that information to create knowledge, and what you do with that knowledge to create wisdom. So it's not as simple as just extracting data and that's sufficient. One of the most well-paid jobs in the world at the moment is obviously becoming a data analyst. It's incredibly lucrative to be able to do that job. And it's the interpretation of the data that matters. So getting data out of a business is not as tricky as people think either. It all exists. So you can find trends, you can find things that people want. We're doing a lot of work at the moment at the LPI on capability mapping.
Right.
So trying to find, what skills are within a business that could be used in different ways.
Mhm.
So when you use the data effectively, you end up creating almost a micro gig economy within companies where we'll bring you in because you've got this expertise on emotional intelligence. Perhaps you could help with this contract. Ed, you've got the data background. Could you work with Omnia on this? And then we could create a micro team just to do that project. So I think a lot of job descriptions will go out of the window in the next few years, and it will just be projects that you work on and you switch from another one, which I think is exciting. But it will require people to make sense of the inordinate, unprecedented amount of data that exists now. That's
Right.
what will be.
It's overwhelming, right? There's so
Mhm.
much data going on, and there are a lot of advances going on from every single part of the world and every single sector, and it's just overwhelming. And how can an institute like yours actually make it easier for others and help them just, help to ground them with everything going on?
It's another really great question, and I might be being a little controversial here, but you've caught me on a good day on there. Um, I think it's about demystifying the complicated. So although there's a lot of information out there, it's not necessary to know everything about everything. So one of the biggest issues that we see from our data, ironically, in the generation coming through is the problem of distraction. So being able to focus on one thing is really difficult because you have constant social media alerts, notifications coming through, and it's really difficult to not spend half an hour just scrolling through it and checking it out. So how do you maintain focus? One of the huge growth sectors at the moment is mental health and well-being for good and bad reasons. So we're going to have an obligation to look after people. If AI replaces a lot of jobs, there's arguments for universal income, universal basic income as well. How do we make people able to survive? How do we support people? So these are really interesting times now. And I think it will be the people that understand how to harness two entities, people and technology, to drive individual and organizational performance. So
Right.
neither of the two in isolation give you all the answers, but put together, it's incredibly powerful.
Right. With this, I want to ask you one final question is that how can we put them together? You actually published, I think, 2 hours ago, something around that on
Yeah,
LinkedIn. I would like
yeah.
to, yeah, how can we, I mean, we talk about empathy, we talk about, educating people to use technology, etc. How, when there is resistance still today on using the technology, and at the same time, the technology is not really very advanced as it should be, as how, as in what we expect in the future. How can we make sure we bring in these two, leverage them, and just move forward?
There's a really deep answer to that, which I will go with, which is we have to learn to trust people again. And it's really difficult when we live in such a polarized society, politically, religiously, voting for, I mean, my country, very synonymous now with polarized politics, having voted to come out of Europe. And it was 51-49 on the percentages. So, in a polarized society like that, where do people go to trust others? So this sense of community will start to permeate how we exist, and people will crave human interaction a lot more. They'll pay hundreds to see Taylor Swift in concert, but they can download or stream any of her best gig performances like that. So why are they doing that? They still want the live experience. They still want to be connected to human beings. So I have great hope for the future for the world's population, but equally, there are some moral issues with the content that we can access now. And how do we prevent people being scared, intimidated, mass epidemic of loneliness? How do we prevent that as well? So I think this, when you say how do you combine people and technology, from a learning perspective, one of the most powerful ways to deliver learning at the moment is in this kind of environment that you and I are using now, because I can see you and your interactions with me, and I feel like there's a kind of human presence. It's not self-paced e-learning, but equally, we don't have to travel thousands of miles to see each other, and all the expense that goes with that. We can do this click of a button, and it works, and we can record it. So that's from a learning perspective still optimal, some human interaction. But if we could absorb the use of generative AI tools into this meeting while we're talking, that will be for the next year how learning will look. The combination of those three entities. That's my prediction.
Let's hope so. Let's hope it happens. I would like some music. Thank you very much for your time. Is there any final thoughts on this topic that you would like to share with us?
No, it's fine. I think we should be very positive about the future of learning. We shouldn't be intimidated by it. There's so much opportunity now, and historically, and I've been in this for 25 years, it's always the thing that gets cut in fact financially difficult times. It won't be anymore because people are constantly having to upskill and reskill. So we need to be positive about it. We need to embrace technology, but also be at the forefront of a very human approach to workplace performance.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Edmund, and it was a pleasure speaking with you.
And you, thanks, Sonia. Take care.
Good day. Bye.
Bye.